So figuring out the most realistic Pokemon a certain person would have is something of an activity, and when those people aren't you and are instead world leaders and historical figures, things can get pretty fun. And educational, which just so happens to be my favorite combination of things. And now, along with Pokemon, I am also a big fan of the Civilization games, and Civ 7 coming out around now-ish. It gives us a pretty decently balanced list of world leaders and historical figures throughout all of time and across the planet. So that's a pretty decent list to work off of. So like, who would Benjamin Franklin have? You know him, one of America's founding fathers, helped write the Declaration of Independence, was America's first ambassador to France, where he partied really hardcore while also getting support for the war. He also did science with a key and a kite. "Electricity is cool and a thing" is a famous quote we all love to share right after the Pledge of Allegiance each morning. He also invented bifocals and the lightning rod. Clearly Sableye could help him with the whole glasses thing, and could even act as a little scientific assistant. Big, "Yes, Master, Igor Goblin energy. Yeah." That's how I imagine Sableye, anyway. But if he really wanted to study electricity, he would probably have an electric type. Probably Dedenne. Lots of science can be done with rodents like Dedenne, and they live in Kalos, which is based on France. They electrically communicate with one another via their antenna whiskers, and Benjamin would have a field day studying that. Plus, those electric types would help him fight off British reinforcements coming over by boat, so I could see Ampharos 2, Lighthouse vibes, tricking the British to come near and then zap! Amina was queen of the Rizal kingdom and represents the Hausa people of West Africa. While she ruled, she expanded her kingdom through military tactics, economic pressure, and everyone's favorite, slavery. She herself was also a leading warrior in her brother's cavalry, so an African horse girl. That's Zebstrika. She also used her wealth to build walls around most of her cities, which would go on to last centuries. And given how most walls were built in the region, I do feel like a swarm of Durant could easily help with constructing them, especially the northern reaches of her territory where sandstorms are common. And throughout her conquests, she was said to take in a new lover in each town she took over, and beheaded them the morning after. Gruesome. Sounds like Cleavor would help with that. And all the warfare. Machiavelli. I do not know this man, but look at him. I hate him. Reincarnation of Cicero right here. A diplomat, philosopher, author, and historian in the Italian Renaissance. Apparently, he's often called the father of modern political science, so you can blame him. Actually, you really kinda can. His writings were controversial, but not because they were wrong or revolutionary or anything, but because they just said the quiet part out loud. They showed how politics had always involved deception, treachery, and crime, and that modern and upcoming leaders should use the same tactics if they want to get ahead. It was for this reason that some labeled him and his work a teacher of evil. Literally, you can summarize his guidebook as how to trick people and lie to get ahead politically. Even centuries later, his philosophies are on point. His bonuses are all about gaining influence and getting others to do what you want. Hey, yeesh. The dude even looks like a Morgrim. Evil little fey creature who has two perfectly fitting moves. False Surrender, also known as Groveling Strike. It acts like it's surrendering, and then it strikes! And its other main move is Confide. It tells a secret to the opponent, making them lose concentration, which just makes it easier to fool them, as they're distracted by it. Huh. Weavile is pretty intelligent itself, but mainly it's dark and agile, an excellent thief or spy with bad intentions. And you know, Alolan Raticate too, the dirty rat. Look at him, he looks like a rat, in the derogatory sense, not the cute kind. And Alolan Raticate is a greedy mob boss, getting others to do its dirty work. He's gross. Kinda like Napoleon Bonaparte. I mean, literally, Empoleon is named after him. They even share design elements. Both are prideful and show off their battle or military prowess with great honor. Yeah, before we even, get into him, he helped in the French Revolution and expansion of the French Empire, but even though he was a military genius, he spurred another French Revolution against him after the people decided that they hated him. He was a very hateable dude, but given the location, he would have easy access to Meowstic too. A pair of them could even use their clever psychic powers to supplement Napoleon's own strategic mind. And lastly, honestly, Yveltal. In many people's minds, Napoleon was evil, full stop. And honestly, he is a mixed bag at best, for sure. His warmongering and desire for ultimate power caused millions of deaths, but he did help modernize France's legal system and was charismatic and likable in small groups of his noble peers. Supposedly. Yeah, no, that doesn't make him good. He would absolutely awaken the legendary Pokemon of Destruction to help him grow his empire. Ashoka the Great was an ancient Indian emperor known for brutally conquering and half genociding the Kalinga region, and spreading the religion of peace and contentment, Buddhism, across his empire. I kinda kid with the tone though. It was the gruesome, death-laden brutality of the takeover that made him realize just how messed up war and all that is. Thus his conversion and desire for others not to follow in his warmongering footsteps. Which is why in this game there are two versions of him, one more militaristic and one from years later when he was fully religious. Which is pretty fitting of Medidite, a meditating warrior monk of a sort. And honestly, there's no way for this guy to escape Kaparaja, the Indian war elephant. Ashoka, of course, used war elephants in his conquests, but elephants themselves can also be very peaceful, so long as you don't mess with them. Lastly, gumshoes. Mongoose, of course, are plentiful in India, and I feel that bringing a detective or guard is fitting. It was brought to Alola to ruthlessly deal with the Rattata problem by killing them, half genociding them. Now it mostly just keeps the peace, staking out locations, being a guard. The first Roman Emperor Augustus is here, and all roads lead to Rome. That way, the group of little dudes known as Phalanx can march their way home, the adorable little Roman soldiers. And seeing as the Romans took a lot from the Greeks, Aegislash has to be here. It's based on a legendary Greco-Roman shield and sword, and I could absolutely see Augustus having one on each side of him as his personal bodyguards. But other than military might, Augustus was known for greatly improving the infrastructure of his empire, as well as reforming the tax code in order to fund such improvements. It's no wonder his in-game bonuses relate to more production in the capital, the more cities you have. And the gold discount when buying buildings makes sense too. Someone like him would absolutely love the strength and utility of Machamp, who's not only a powerful fighter, but is frequently seen doing heavy labor, things like moving heavy objects and construction. So Catherine the Great, right? Empress of Russia who was just simply sick of her husband's and so overthrew him. Now under her rule, Russia finally joined the Enlightenment era and started establishing new forms of law, schools focusing on science and the arts, and of course, territorial expansion through war when diplomacy didn't work. Funny how as things change, they stay the same. In-game, she gets science and culture bonuses when tundra and great works are involved. Great works being famous statues, songs, paintings, plays, etc. They provide culture and tourism bonuses. Catherine would absolutely have an Aurorus, a big, beautiful beast of an ice-type Pokemon with some inspiration from the fairy tale The Snow Queen. Aurorus's cries create Aurora. Not only does that make it perfect for her stage plays and ballet, but it is also a product of science, being a revived fossil Pokemon and all. And Swanna? Oh yeah, Swanna, the Swan Ballerina. Swan Lake is one of the most famous ballet in history. And it's Russian. And just to top off the science, Reuniclus, an often studied Pokemon in the Pokemon world, and one who tends to prefer colder temperatures. Do you think you could use its goo to make, paint? Charlemagne was king of the Franks and more, and is often said to be the father of Europe, as he and his early medieval court started many of the government reforms and traditions and such that went on to define the Middle Ages in Europe. His doings came to be known as the First Medieval Renaissance. Under him, more people were learning how to read and write, perform music, build sturdier structures, and there was art, there were schools, and notably, they served both Christians and pagans, which helped create this boom. Celebrations and festivals became the norm, and that is likely why, in-game, Charlemagne loves them, and other Sims who have them. His military and science buildings also give his people bonus happiness, and his cavalry is stronger while celebrating. So, a celebrating French king, eh? Cobalion. It's not a horse, but it's close enough. Plus, it's one of the Swords of Justice, who are based on the French Three Musketeers, and it's got his big royal beard and favorite color coat. Charlemagne is also personally responsible for paladins existing and having that name, so the equally French chestnut is perfectly fitting as his royal guard. And speaking of his love of parties, ain't no party a real party without Ludicolo, and we got Shuckle bringing the drinks, Loudred on music, and Diancead, the medieval pink princess, on making some lovely lights. That last one is definitely perfect for him, kings and their treasury and all. Definitely would live in the castle and also make pretty decor for the less intense balls and such. Confucius say, plus 25% growth rate in all cities, plus 2 science from specialists. Huh. Well, the extra population is definitely fitting of China, and extra science is fitting because Confucius was like a whole founder of a whole philosophical way of thinking, a religion, a government system, and a way of life. Confucianism, which went on to play a massive role in Chinese nobility and history for more than 2,000 years. I think it's safe to say he would absolutely have Absol, who's not only based on an ancient mythical Chinese beast, but is also wise, able to sense impending doom or natural disasters before they happen, just getting a feel of them. Yeah. It's coming. That is something the caring and wise Confucius would appreciate. Same with Altaria, who's partially based on Peng from Chinese mythology, a bird of unusually large size. Balls. Altaria is a calm Pokemon who takes its time with things and loves peace and happiness above all. And lastly, I could see Mine Xiao, an ermine kung fu master wielding the long sleeves of Chinese opera performers. The smooth motions it makes require discipline and balance, both of which are key aspects in Confucian philosophy. Also, it's pretty cute, despite it kinda looking like an old man. Kinda like Confucius. Frederick the Great was the monarch of Prussia, which comprised parts of what is East Germany, Poland, and Russia today. You can remember it by saying Poland, Russia, Prussia. It's like a Pokemon name. Frederick's own Pokemon cry would sound like a flute, because he famously played the flute super well and was even a whole composer. Yet despite his love of music, his accomplishments do include a load of Prussian territorial expansion, military prowess, and war crimes. Dude was a bit of a monster. And this combo of good at war and lover of the arts is precisely why Adolf Hitler famously idolized him.
Oh yeah, Frederick! I want to be him! Oh!
Yes, that is my young Hitler voice, everybody. Little did Hitler know, though, Frederick was very homosexual. Why do you think he actually chose the flute as his instrument of choice? So a music lover with great military might. It may not fit the setting, but that's very much Komoo's jam. Frederick just paid to import it, I guess. It's a fighting-type dragon covered in musical danglies that it uses to make music during its war dances. That's kinda perfectly mixing the two. And Cricketune! Get over here! Yeah! Literally a cello and a classical music composer in one. And lastly, Gallade, a chivalrous warrior who is just as good at combat as it is being courteous and disciplined. Plus you could pair him with a male Gardevoir. Harriet Tubman, while I've heard of you, how did I not know how cool you were before now? Like, I guess don't answer that, I know why. She helped run the logistically complex Underground Railroad, which helped over 100,000 slaves escape the cruel grip of states' rights. During the Civil War, she even led a Union army composed of African Americans because
They may not deserve to be enslaved, but they do also need to be segregated still.
baby steps. She also played a huge role in women's suffrage later on, which also helped make her into the icon of freedom that she is today, and as such, Braviary would be a Pokemon of choice. It's based partially on the bald eagle, which has come to symbolize the same. It could also definitely help her scout and spot potential threats along the Underground Railroad, which a Pokemon like Excadrill would be a massive help with too, making and maintaining the many literal underground tunnels with ease. And lastly, before you think it's racist, let me explain. Whimsicott. The stereotypical slave job was working on cotton plantations, hence the Unovan, American, brown-skinned cotton Pokemon. Of course, though, Harriet's bonuses relate to underground, spy, espionage, sneaky stuff, so if your goal is to get into plantations and free the slaves, it'd be very helpful to look like a slave in the process of letting them know, hey, we're gonna escape tonight, you know? Thus having a cottony Pokemon. You would have a slave's Pokemon. Plus, while escaping, it could use its bushy body to sweep their tracks away. I guess that is literally what Nickit does, but I think slave owners would notice if the slave they don't recognize also has a sassy fox Pokemon with them instead of another cotton bundle. Hatshepsut was the Egyptian pharaoh starting in 1479 BC. She specifically expanded trade with Egypt's neighbors, feeling that while everyone would benefit from wide-reaching trade networks, Egypt would benefit the most, being that it was so central into the Western world at the time. And the resulting wealth turned into large building projects, including many temples, roads, and the tallest obelisks at the time. Most famously, though, and perhaps her favorite project, the Temple of Pakhet, named after Bast and Sekhmet, similar lioness war goddesses. So a female pyroar is perfect, especially considering Hatshepsut herself was often depicted as a sphinx, which are part lion. Plus, you know, Egyptians and their cats. Hence also Solgaleo being here, who is an ambassador of the sun, and Egyptians, of course, loved the sun. Ra. Some say it's pronounced Ray, and I think that's actually more correct. I didn't look it up. And now, it is way too easy to say Kaf egregious, and that's exactly why I'm going to pick it anyway. Take a guess at what happened when she died. Take a nice, long guess. Plus, its ghost typing is a bit fitting. She was mostly erased from history by her consort's Thutmose III's son. Literally just had her name chiseled off of everything they could possibly find with her signature on it. They wanted her forgotten. Hence, her ghostly Kaf egregious wrath. Himiko is a semi-legendary shamaness queen of Wa, which is Japan today. And there are no historical records about her written from her own people. Everything we know about her was written by her classical Chinese and Korean neighbors, and in those cases, it was pretty much just how she related to those Chinese and Korean leaders at the time, sending gifts of fabric and slaves, though it was written that she was a practitioner of magic and sorcery. Some in China even claimed that that was the only possible way a woman could have risen to power in a time of war and confusion. Clearly, she must have hypnotized or just cast a spell to control her subjects. She had so much control over them that she demanded that when she died, she would take 100 of her servants along with her to the grave to serve her in the afterlife. So a mysterious, magic-wielding woman of power who was a strict ruler. I could definitely see Hisuian Zorarg, a kitsune with many mysteries and legends surrounding it, who uses illusionary magic to appear as other Pokemon. It can even act quite a bit cruel as well, much like Frostlass, based on the Yuki-onna yokai. A cruel ghost woman who freezes men dead in their tracks. But Pecharunt, oh, Pecharunt fits well too. A mythical Pokemon based on a Japanese folktale itself, it controls the actions of others through binding mochi and toxic chains, making them do sinister things against their will. Like do a chicken dance. Ibn Battuta is considered the greatest explorer in pre-modern history, and somehow I didn't know about him until now. Born in Morocco, he traveled and wrote about trade routes from Iberia to the Middle East and down past the Horn of Africa, and his writings went on to inspire like-minded travelers and even some international policy. Like Egad, I know about Marco Polo, another famous explorer and scholar, but Ibn here literally walked 5 Marco Polos worth. Imagine being 5 times better than the dude most famous for your skills. That's the power of whiteness. This guy gets exploration and diplomatic bonuses, obviously, and that makes a Pokemon kinda like Kilowattrel perfect. It's based on this frigate bird. These guys fly over entire oceans on a regular basis, and would definitely help him while traveling in the air. Then, Lapras would help him travel by sea. That's like its whole thing, and it enjoys being helpful too. There's your diplomacy. And Cyclizar would help him travel by land, of course. That's their whole point. Gotta go fast while given a ride, plus they're native to Paldea, which is, you know, in Iberia, which is like right across the water from his homeland. Which is where we'll find Queen Isabella the Catholic. She was a ruler of Castile, which is today Spain. Her nickname, the Catholic, is pretty important too, considering she is one of the 2 main figureheads of the Spanish Inquisition. She demanded her kingdom expand and that her new and existing subjects were Catholic or cast out. Also, nobody expected it. Aside from that little shindig though, she just wanted to tell the world how great her kingdom was, and as such, sponsored a load of expeditions into the New World. I claim this land for Spain! And all that. Her doing. She would probably have an army of Houndoom to help her inquisitors out. I mean, nothing says Wrath of the Inquisition like a hellhound who breathes hellfire, giving 3rd-degree burns that hurt permanently to punish the sinners for not belonging to the religion of love, mercy, and charitability and forgiveness. She'd also be personally enchanted by a Gimmighoul, absolutely. Gimmighoul enchants people to get them to bring more coins to them. After all, most of the exploration she funded was specifically in return for getting treasures from faraway lands. Hence her bonuses in this game. Lastly, how about Torkoal? A treasure brought back from the New World who can act as a Catholic censer. Those round things that popey people swing around to spread smoke all over, just like Torkoal. Yeah! I have now been introduced to Jose Rizal, a polymath Filipino national hero who wrote a lot of Philippine Revolution type stuff, which did, of course, spur a revolution and ultimately independence from Spain. So he's kinda like their Ben Franklin or Thomas Jefferson, all the way down to being on their 2 pesos bill. So chat, what Pokemon do you think would be on the $2 bill? Let me know in the comments. But this guy really was a jack of all trades, which I guess is also what a polymath is. Not only was he well educated and skilled in the arts, but he was an ophthalmologist, a martial artist, a cartographer, a fencer, a playwright, and so much more. But it was his fight for a free and fair Philippines that he's most famous for. A seeker of justice. Let's give him Keldeo, a fencer, water horse, and honorary member of the Swords of Justice. Servine, or superior, fits a good bit too. Green snakes, like the pit vipers, live in the Philippines, but also it reflects his love of botany, and also his well-established, well-educated gentleman vibe. Also, quite famously, there are Filipino water buffalo, and Jose did travel between Spain and the Philippines, so the water Paldean Toros feels fitting in that regard, especially considering how powerful and moving it is. Lafayette, or I'm just gonna call him Lafayette. He was a French military officer who joined George Washington in the American Revolutionary War and then later played a decisive role in the French Revolution. It has got to be Talonflame, the regional bird from Kalos, France, but also one who is courageous and swift and makes bold military decisions, all with the goal of liberty. Plus, its name is stupid. Frogadier'd be good. A French grenadier, a specialized soldier, and one with this silly white bubble scarf to match Lafayette's silly white wig. I gotta look into why men ruined themselves with those. I could see Lucario here also, actually, who they do have a notable population in Kalos, but they represent justice, loyalty, and courage themselves. Its fighting steel type aligns with Lafayette's role as a soldier and military leader, but with a strong moral compass. Plus, its aura ability could help him get vibe checks on his fellow French revolutionaries. After all, not all of them had the same goals in mind. Hence the issue of there being multiple French revolutions all kind of close to each other. Pachacuti is the half-legendary man who created and leads the Incan Empire. Who chose mountains who's boss? I mean, you kind of gotta if you're going to form an empire akin to the Roman Empire, but entirely in the mountains. All kinds of in-game mountain-related bonuses makes him a perfect fit for Sneasler right away, the ice and mountain climber who ascends vertically with ease. Then, in a long-winded past video, I explained how Terapagos and the proto-legendary beasts are Incan in origin, so absolutely Terapagos, who represents Pachamama, the Incan Mother Nature goddess, essentially, who Pachacuti honored greatly. And then, of the beasts, I'll say Gouging Fire. Their hats kinda match. Also, bonus, Sigilif, who's based on the Nazca lines, the Nazca eventually being part of the Incan Empire. Born in what is today Ohio, I am so sorry. Tecumseh was a Shawnee warrior chief who spread an important message to fellow indigenous Americans, even outside of his own First Nation.
These white men are dangerous. No one is to go near them.
Thus forming Tecumseh's Confederacy, which fought well and hard against the westward expansion of the United States. Xatu is easy. It's one of the few outwardly Native American Pokemon, but its future sight would help Tecumseh in battles. The Unovan Tornadus could be fitting too. Tecumseh was also the spiritual leader of his people, and one major Shawnee spirit that would be particularly helpful to him is the Cyclone person, who, despite being the cause of destructive tornadoes, was mostly seen as positive, perhaps even only destroying things that deserve to be. And lastly, let's go Obstagoon, actually, an obstinate punky protester. Many American protests have had those participating in them wear Native American garb as symbols, for better or for worse, and they are almost always demanding the government not do something. They block it. They become an obstacle, which was Tecumseh's goal, to block the United States from taking even more indigenous land. Trung Trac, along with her sister, were military leaders for the Lafayette, today Vietnam, all while being young women on the smaller side. And despite little equipment and being vastly outnumbered by Han Dynasty China, she successfully commanded a rebellion against their rule of the area, and she became the first queen in Vietnamese history. For a time anyway. Only a couple of years later, the Han sent overwhelming reinforcements and then gave her head to the Emperor. She gets military and science bonuses, especially with tropical tiles, so a kick-butt Jungle Queen Pokemon? That's Serena! Full stop! Literally a Queen Mangosteen in Dominatrix boots. with which to step on you. And Marshadow too. Marshadow's always had a bit of a Southeast Asian flair in its design, and sticking to the shadows and making precise strikes is a big part of fighting against significantly more powerful foes like what they were up against. I can definitely see Hisui and Lilligant being useful here too, a grass fighting type able to deal damage with rapid kicks and sharp footwear, all while being petite and elegant, I might add. Definitely easy to misjudge them, and then quickly regret doing so. And lastly on this list, it's Xerxes, the king of kings of the Persian Empire. He's in the Bible, don't you know? Xerxes expanded his empire through military might, but after a loss to the Greeks, he decided he didn't want to play with war anymore, and instead used his plundered riches to build palaces, roads, market squares, amphitheaters, and extensive trade networks. Also, his name is Xerxes. This guy. I'm feeling Nidoking, right? Any self-proclaimed king of kings would need a king Pokemon, plus Nidoking is no pushover. It's powerful and dominant in battle, and yet it uses its strength for digging burrows and building things up too. Perfect for Xerxes' later years. And Milotic. It's decent in battle, but it's mainly about elegance and beauty, which Xerxes strove for in his luxurious lifestyle. The grandeur of his court was unlike any before it, and having a Milotic alongside him would only add to that. Also, funnily, it's very Greek-inspired, so a friendly reminder of why he's living peacefully now. And lastly, Garganacle. A good chunk of Persia's wealth came from the salt trade, and the area is also bedazzled with ziggurats. Garganacle is a salt block ziggurat, and also a golem, who would work perfectly as his vigilant, ever-ready guards. And anyway, that is my take on all these people, and I'm sure some of you have more extensive knowledge about them, and thus think you're better than me. You probably are, but let me know down below what Pokemon you'd move around and swap out for others. If this video does well enough, I'll do more. Perhaps the list of Civ 6 people. That is a much larger list. I guess because that game is actually finished. I'm sure by 2035, Civ 7 will almost be too.